"You're just a nanny, Emily, a glorified babysitter." Those were the words Emily Carter heard from her mother, Diane, on her 26th birthday. Words that seared into her memory like a scar. At the time, Emily was a lead teacher at a small preschool, passionate about early childhood development and proud of the work she was doing. But in her parents' world, her mother, a high-powered attorney, and her father, a cardiac surgeon, anything short of a six-figure title was considered failure. 6 years later, Emily stood in the lobby of a newly purchased property, her fifth Bright Steps Learning Center, worth more than $2 million. Her phone buzzed with a message from Diane. "Have you filled the receptionist spot at your flagship location?" The irony wasn't lost on her. The same woman who once dismissed Emily's career now sought a place in the company born from it. As a child, Emily never dreamed of red carpets or boardrooms. Her heroes were her second-grade teacher and her camp counselor. She had always known that shaping young minds was her calling. But growing up in a Boston home where ambition meant Ivy League degrees and courtroom victories, her dream was seen as a detour, not a destination. What they didn't realize was that the very thing they mocked would become the foundation of an educational empire, built not from prestige, but from purpose. The silence at dinner that night was suffocating. After announcing she'd chosen the early childhood education program at Boston University, Claire Whitmore sat upright, fingers clutching the edges of her napkin like a lifeline. Her father, Dr. Philip Whitmore, studied his wine glass in stoic silence, while her mother, Victoria, the city's most prominent family law attorney, slowly placed her fork down. "We assumed you'd choose Northwestern's pre-law program," Victoria finally said, voice sharp but controlled. "Or at least business." "I want to teach," Claire replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "I've always wanted that." "You're aiming too low, sweetheart," her mother sighed. "Teaching is fine for those who have no other options. But with your intelligence, why not medicine? Law?" Her father finally spoke. "We'll support whatever you choose," he said, though the disappointment in his tone cut deeper than any words could. It wasn't just a lack of approval. It was a quiet rejection of everything Claire had dared to dream. But Boston University was the first place Claire truly felt she belonged. While her peers obsessed over prestige and titles, Claire immersed herself in the theories of child development and the intricacies of shaping young minds. She thrived in courses about emotional intelligence and early learning frameworks. And for the first time, she was surrounded by people who didn't mock her ambitions, but shared them. Her roommates didn't always understand her passion, but her closest friends did. She bonded tightly with Ava Lynn, the daughter of a first-generation Taiwanese immigrant family, and Jordan McCoy, a former finance major who'd left Wall Street after volunteering at a children's literacy nonprofit. The three of them often stayed up until 2 a.m. at the campus cafe, sketching out wild plans for a school of the future, one that honored every part of a child, not just their test scores. Claire's big break came during her junior year when she received the department's award for innovative curriculum design. Brimming with pride, she called home and invited her parents to the ceremony. "It's on the 18th, 7 p.m., she said, trying to keep her tone light. "That's your father's hospital fundraiser night," Victoria replied instantly. "You know we can't miss that. Could you just come for the award part? My presentation starts at 8. "Claire, be reasonable," her mother sighed. "It's just a student award. There will be others." But there weren't others. That was the moment Claire stopped hoping for their applause. That night, she stood on stage to thunderous applause from her professors and peers. Jessica's parents had driven 5 hours to be there, beaming from the front row. The 2 empty chairs Claire had reserved for her own parents stood like quiet accusations. Bathed in spotlight, she walked home that night not in bitterness, but with a hardened resolve. She would build something real, something valuable, not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. During her senior year, she secured a prestigious internship at Morningstar Academy, Boston's most competitive private preschool. There, under the mentorship of the brilliant yet nurturing Dr. Louise Hart, Claire began crafting the model that would later define her career, a fusion of academic rigor and emotional intelligence, designed to nurture the whole child. Dr. Hart noticed Claire's instinct immediately. "You're not just teaching," she once told her. "You're listening. That's rare. That's leadership." Claire stayed at Morningstar after graduation, quickly rising to lead curriculum coordinator within just 1 year. While her peers celebrated law firm placements and medical residencies, Claire was shaping young minds in a quiet classroom decorated with sensory bins, phonics games, and watercolor masterpieces. And yet, at every family gathering, her work was dismissed as cute. At her cousin Luke's engagement dinner, someone asked how many children Claire was planning to have, now that she loved babysitting so much. "I don't babysit," she said with a smile that barely masked her fury. "I design developmentally aligned learning environments that foster cognitive, emotional, and social growth in early learners." The room fell silent. Her mother laughed nervously. "She's very passionate." But passion wasn't enough anymore. That night, Claire opened her laptop and began drafting the outline of something she had only whispered to herself in dreams: her own learning center. A place where her philosophy could bloom without restrictions. A place where children would be seen, valued, and challenged. A place that wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. She didn't know then how hard the road would be, or that the same people who once doubted her would one day ask for jobs within her company. But that night, the first seed of Bright Path Learning was planted, and it would grow into something no one could ignore. Claire didn't wait for the perfect moment, because it would never come. With $8 in savings, a half-used notebook full of ideas, and a rented desk in the back of a shared co-working space, she officially registered Bright Path Learning. There was no big ribbon cutting, no corporate backers or family inheritance, just a quiet line on the Secretary of State's website confirming its existence. The hardest part came next: finding a space. Boston real estate wasn't kind to startups, especially ones not backed by wealthy investors. Landlords scoffed when she mentioned early education. Bankers politely declined her loan applications, pointing to her limited assets. Claire spent months visiting rundown storefronts and forgotten office suites, none of which were child-safe or code-compliant. Her phone filled with rejection emails. Still, she refused to give up. Finally, in a quiet corner of Dorchester, she found a former community center, abandoned, with peeling paint and broken windows, but large, with sunlight flooding through its high windows. It smelled of mildew and hope. She knew instantly, this is it. Convincing the owner wasn't easy. But when she showed him her curriculum model, her certifications, and her vision boards filled with colorful classrooms and emotionally inclusive learning spaces, something shifted in his eyes. "My wife used to be a teacher," he said softly. "She would have liked this." They shook hands. Claire had 3 months to renovate and launch. It felt impossible. The plumbing was a mess. The heating barely worked. The city's licensing process was a maze of red tape, safety inspections, and zoning nightmares. She stayed up past midnight most nights, painting walls herself and scrubbing tiles until her hands bled. She watched YouTube tutorials to learn how to fix a leaky sink. Ava and Jordan, her college friends, drove in every weekend to help her assemble furniture from Craigslist and build sensory corners using thrifted supplies. Bright Path didn't have money for ads, so Claire walked door to door, handing out flyers to parents in nearby apartment complexes and local grocery stores. She created a free workshop for parents on raising resilient kids, and used the event to introduce them to her space. Only 4 families showed up, but one of them enrolled. Her first student was a 4-year-old boy named Malik, whose mother worked 2 shifts at a nursing home. Malik was shy, barely spoke above a whisper, and flinched at loud noises. Claire took extra time each day to sit with him, gently encouraging his speech, helping him build confidence with simple routines. Within a month, he was laughing during circle time, reading his name off flashcards. Word of mouth spread. Slowly, 1 enrollment turned into 5, then 10. By the end of that first year, Claire had 18 full-time students, and a wait list. But it came at a cost. Claire worked 70-hour weeks. She taught, cleaned, handled payroll, wrote lesson plans, and even patched up the playground fence after hours. Some nights, she cried on the cold kitchen floor of her apartment, overwhelmed by invoices and imposter syndrome. And still, her parents never once asked how it was going. Until the article. 1 year after launch, a Boston parenting magazine did a feature titled, "The Woman Redefining Childcare in the City." They interviewed Claire, toured the school, and praised her approach to whole child development. The article went semi-viral. An editor from the Boston Globe picked it up. Suddenly, Claire was being invited to speak on early education panels. Preschool directors asked her to consult. A donor offered to fund a second location in Cambridge. And then, out of nowhere, came a text from her mother. Saw the article. Impressive. Have some time to chat? Claire stared at the screen for a full minute. Then she put it down and got back to preparing story time for Malik's class. Because this wasn't about being acknowledged anymore. This was about building something lasting. And Claire was just getting started. 3 months after the Boston Globe article, Claire received an email she never expected. Subject: Application. Bright Path Front Office. Sender: Victoria Whitmore. Attached was a resume, succinct, polished, and unmistakable. The former managing partner of one of Massachusetts' top law firms, with 3 decades of courtroom experience, was now applying for a part-time receptionist role at her daughter's early education center. Claire stared at the screen in disbelief. No apology, no acknowledgement of past dismissals or harsh words. Just a resume, sent from the same woman who once scoffed at the idea of her daughter working with toddlers. After several hours of contemplation, Claire replied, "We are currently hiring for a part-time front desk position. If you're willing to begin at 7:30 a.m. and attend team training, I can schedule an interview. No favoritism, no exceptions." The following week, Victoria arrived at Bright Path, Dorchester. The original location, small, imperfect, and the very heart of Claire's mission. She wore a modest dress suit and had her hair pinned neatly. But her confident lawyer's gait had softened into something almost tentative. She paused at the wall filled with children's artwork, staring at the crayon-drawn masterpieces, seemingly unsure what to say. Claire led her on a tour, past the sensory room, the social-emotional circle space, the quiet reading nook. Children waved and hugged Claire as they passed, one boy running up to show her a handmade bead bracelet. Claire crouched, gasped in admiration, and wore it with pride. Victoria said nothing. She just watched. Claire offered her no desk job, no strategy meetings, just the receptionist seat in the busiest location, where phones rang non-stop, toddlers wandered out of line, and parents vented without filters. Claire didn't want her mother to help manage. She wanted her to understand. Because at Bright Path, status meant nothing. Compassion meant everything. The first few weeks were grueling. Victoria, once commanding multi-million-dollar divorce settlements, now had to track peanut allergies, print out sign-in sheets, answer anxious parents, and, on one unforgettable day, mop the bathroom floor when a janitor called in sick. But she didn't quit. Claire watched from a distance. Slowly, her mother began to change. There were no more smug glances at sensory bins, no passive comments about wasted potential. She started smiling when kids danced to lunchtime songs. She wiped away a tear when a little boy, silent for weeks, shouted, "I did it," after tying his shoes for the first time. One afternoon, Claire saw her mother sitting cross-legged beside a girl who was crying because a friend had called her painting ugly. Claire braced herself for the typical, "toughen up," response. But instead, Victoria gently asked, "What do you like about your painting?" The girl sniffled, "I like the colors. They make me happy." Victoria smiled and said, "Then that's enough." Claire nearly cried. For the first time in her life, she wasn't seeing Attorney Whitmore. She was seeing a woman learning how to begin again. Without pride, without judgment. Weeks later, as the sun set and most of the staff had gone home, Victoria lingered outside Claire's office, then knocked softly. "I never understood what you were building," she said quietly. "Not really. I was too busy trying to shape you into something I could recognize. But this is extraordinary." She hesitated. "And I'm proud of you, not because you succeeded, but because you never gave up on who you are." Claire didn't need an apology. Her mother's transformation said everything. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come with a grand speech. Sometimes, it comes with quiet hands doing unglamorous work, with a willingness to start at the bottom, with the humility to see your child not as a reflection of your own legacy, but as someone building a legacy entirely their own. And for the first time in their lives, Claire and Victoria were finally speaking the same language. The transformation from a small neighborhood preschool in Dorchester to a city-wide educational movement didn't happen overnight. It was built slowly, child by child, milestone by milestone. A toddler learning to read a year ahead of schedule. A tearful parent watching their nonverbal child finally say, "I love you." A teacher whispering to Claire, "You're the first person who made me feel like education could be human again." 2 years after launching, Bright Path Learning operated 4 independent centers across the greater Boston area. Each one stayed fiercely loyal to Claire's core values: whole child development, emotional intelligence, and human-first teaching. She declined every franchising offer. Investors were baffled. In an era where childcare was becoming increasingly commercialized, Bright Path felt almost old-fashioned. Claire resisted tech overload, refused to push accelerated math, and never turned her classrooms into performance factories. Instead, in every Bright Path Center, you'd find children learning to name emotions: sad, mad, frustrated, joyful, daily, quiet choice sessions, where kids picked between painting, reading, or simply sitting peacefully. Life lessons embedded in play: how to wait your turn, how to say no kindly, how to lose and try again. The media took notice. A PBS education segment dubbed Bright Path a quiet revolution in early learning. Public school administrators from New Hampshire sent observers. A national publishing house reached out to turn Claire's teaching philosophy into a book. She turned down many offers, including one from a major educational toy company, afraid of compromising her mission. "I don't want our classrooms to become backdrops for corporate campaigns," she said in one interview. Ironically, that stubborn integrity only made her more celebrated. One June afternoon, while helping a young girl glue cutout paper flowers to a class mural, Claire heard a knock on her office door. Standing there was Edith Monroe, the State Board of Education chair, someone Claire never imagined would walk through her door. "Ms. Whitmore," she began, "we've been observing Bright Path's progress for over a year now, and we believe it's time your model becomes part of the public education conversation. We'd like to invite you to serve as a senior advisor for our preschool reform initiative." Claire blinked, stunned into silence. "We're not asking you to change your model," Monroe added. "We want to preserve exactly what makes Bright Path exceptional: emotional equity, child dignity, and relationship-based learning." Claire agreed. Soon, she was dividing her time between Bright Path and the state-level project called Classrooms of Tomorrow, an initiative piloting her principles in 5 public schools. She trained public school teachers, advised on curriculum, and consulted on environment design. But she never stepped away from her centers. She remained rooted, always. One evening, after the last student had gone home, Claire sat on the rooftop of their newest location with Ava and Jordan, her original co-founders and dearest friends. Below them, the playground swung gently in the breeze under warm, golden lights. "You think this could ever go national?" Ava asked, staring up at the sky. Claire smiled. "I'm not chasing scale. I just want every kid to have a place where they feel heard, whether that's here in Boston or anywhere else." And that was still her answer, then, now, and always. Claire had never sought success in the traditional sense. She never needed validation from headlines or endorsements. All she ever wanted was to do one thing, and do it right: believe in children, even when the world still refuses to. Years later, as Claire Whitmore walked through the laughter-filled halls of her learning centers, she was no longer the young woman dismissed for wanting to work with children. She was the founder of a movement, one that redefined early childhood education and gave countless children, and even adults, a new way to see the world. Bright Path wasn't just a childcare center, it was a declaration that emotional intelligence matters just as much as test scores. That children who feel heard grow into adults who know how to listen. That sometimes, the dreams people mock turn out to be the ones that matter most. Never let someone else define your worth by their limited standards. The path you choose may not gain approval right away, but staying true to your values will open doors no one else saw coming. Real success isn't about early applause. It's about living with purpose and kindness until the world has no choice but to pay attention. Speech balloon. If Claire's story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up for your dream despite being doubted by others? Right finger. Share your story. It could be the light someone else needs. Red heart. And don't forget to subscribe to Family Revenge for more true stories of strength and transformation. Because maybe, the next story we tell will be yours.